and welcome to today's Endangered Species Day celebration. My name is Sierra Tamkin. I am the Learning Experiences Manager here at Fort Collins Museum of Discovery in Fort Collins, Colorado. And I am so excited to be your moderator today and to have you all with me to talk about a very special animal. Today, we are going to talk about the most endangered mammal in North America, the black-footed ferret. We're going to go on a journey together, virtually, but we're going to visit here, the Fort Collins Museum of Discovery, and the National Black-Footed Ferret Conservation Center. We have several amazing speakers lined up today who are going to share with us all they know about black-footed ferrets and tell us a little bit about their conservation and natural history. Before we welcome our guest speakers, I want to share with you too that if you want to learn more about the black-footed ferret or even see them on video, we have two right here at Fort Collins Museum of Discovery. We're the only museum in the world to house black-footed ferrets, and you can see them on their live webcam from our website, FCMoD.org. Our first guest today is Noreen Walsh. She's the Regional Director of the Mountain Prairie Region for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and she knows a lot about black-footed ferrets. Hi, Noreen, welcome.
Thanks, Sierra.
How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for inviting me to join you. And thanks to everybody at the Fort Collins Museum of Discovery, as well as all the folks joining us today virtually to celebrate endangered species conservation and learn more about our conservation efforts for black-footed ferret. Today, folks, you will get to meet Elizabeth Ann, the first clone of a U.S. endangered species. Elizabeth Ann, and the fact that she is a clone, has made a lot of news recently. She is a very exciting advancement in our efforts to prevent the extinction of this species, but also to restore the species to full recovery in the wild. But she's just one of many achievements that date back to 1981, because that's when a rancher in Wyoming discovered what were the last remaining wild black-footed ferrets. He discovered these on his property, and at that point in time, we actually thought that black-footed ferrets were extinct, so it was very exciting. And I know probably some of you listening know the story very well. It was actually the ranch dog named Shep that discovered the ferrets. After that discovery, the state of Wyoming worked with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to capture those few remaining ferrets to start a captive breeding program. And that ultimately led to the creation of the National Black-Footed Ferret Conservation Center that Sierra spoke about, and the recovery team. Today, the Ferret Conservation Center, along with several zoos around North America, administer that captive breeding program to breed and prepare ferrets to be released into the wild. The zoos play a very pivotal role in the recovery of the species. The recovery program as a whole is comprised of many organizations with a lot of very dedicated people who are working to ensure a path forward for black-footed ferrets as a species. First, our tribal partners, including the Navajo Nation, the Lower Brule Sioux, Northern Cheyenne, Rosebud Sioux, Cheyenne River Sioux, Crow, Wallapai, Grovant, and Assiniboine tribes all have been instrumental in our recovery efforts by reintroducing ferrets to tribal lands. Some other very important partners working towards recovery are the American Zoological Association, the U.S. Geological Survey, the Bureau of Land Management, U.S. Forest Service, Bureau of Indian Affairs, many state wildlife agencies, Parks Canada, and many others. And these partnerships amongst all these organizations are really what's making conservation of the black-footed ferret possible. All the way from the recovery implementation team that started in 1997 to this newest development in endangered species conservation, cloning. So why did we consider cloning as a tool for recovery of black-footed ferrets? It really has to do with that last remaining group of wild ferrets that were brought into captivity for breeding. When that captive breeding program was started, only 7 ferrets actually successfully contributed to the breeding effort, And as a result, all black-footed ferrets that we have today come from that limited gene pool of 7 founder animals. Without an appropriate amount of genetic diversity, a species can become more susceptible to diseases and to genetic abnormalities. They can exhibit decreased fertility rates, and the species has just limited ability to adapt to changing conditions in the wild when their genetic diversity is low. So all of those things really make bringing a species back from the brink of extinction very, very challenging. And black-footed ferrets were an ideal endangered species for cloning, as one of the very primary challenges to their recovery is their lack of genetic diversity. Again, because all ferrets that we have today descend from a very small number of individuals. So how did this cloning effort get started? Wyoming had preserved some tissue from a ferret named Willa that lived 30 years ago. Willa had not successfully bred in those years of captivity, and so she died without contributing her genetics to the next generation. Several years ago, public, private, and nonprofit organizations came together to explore whether it would be possible to use Willa's frozen tissue to clone a black-footed ferret. And these organizations include Revive and Restore, Viagen Pets and Equine, San Diego Zoo Global, and the American Zoological Association. And in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we're very grateful to these organizations for their role. And now that we have Elizabeth Ann, now that we have a clone, we're conducting additional studies and research prior to breeding her. And if we do in fact breed her with our captive bred ferrets, it will introduce that DNA from over 30 years ago, adding a significant amount of new genetic material to increase the diversity of future black-footed ferrets. It's been very rewarding to be part of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service team that worked with so many dedicated partners to get to where we are this year with the first clone of an endangered species in the United States. Not all endangered species are as imperiled as the black-footed ferret, but there are over 1,600 animals and plants listed as endangered or threatened under the Endangered Species Act. And U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service continues to work with partners to recover them. These efforts would not be possible for any of these species without the many partners that joined with us, just as I've described here with the black-footed ferret. So now I'm going to turn this microphone over to Robin Bortner. Robin is the senior U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service biologist responsible for managing the captive breeding population at our National Black-Footed Ferret Conservation Center. It's all yours, Robin.
Thank you, Noreen. Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Robin, and today I am here where I work at the National Black-Footed Ferret Conservation Center, and we're going to go visit one of our ferret rooms where we're currently housing Elizabeth Ann, as well as several litters of kits. It is our breeding season, and we've just started having females whelp. We have 4 litters on the ground here at the center, and many expectant mamas to come, including one today very close to where Elizabeth Ann is housed. So we're going to be very quiet while we go into the ferret room. So I may not talk much, and then we're going to come out. We'll go visit a litter very quickly, and then we'll come back out again and talk a little bit more. But we won't talk too much in the room just because some of our females are in a very sensitive time, and they can be sensitive to disturbance. So I'm going to switch my camera around here, and we're going to go on a little tour through our ferret room. So bear with me while we go around. All right, so we're going to head into room 2 here. So this is one of 4 rooms where we house our endangered black-footed ferrets. You can see this is a young male here at the beginning of this first row. And we're just going to go down this way. We're getting close to feeding time, so most of these guys are starting to come up from their naps to see if we're going to bring some food, but that'll happen a little later. see, got some more ferrets here. And Elizabeth Ann is back this way. We're going to see what she's up to. There she is. Hi, Elizabeth Ann. Come up here, we can get a look at her. There she is. Hi. So this is Elizabeth Ann. This is where she lives in our building. Hi, sweetheart. As you can see, she's up and very curious because she also thinks that it might be feeding time. Hi, sweetheart. I actually brought a little food for her, and we can give that to her while we're up here. As you can see, she behaves very much like a black-footed ferret, grabs her food, and then takes it somewhere safe, which is down in her nesting box. Elizabeth Ann is about 5.5 months old now and doing very well. Let's see if she comes back up here. She's enjoying her snack now. I also brought one of her favorite toys, paper bags, which she loves to chase, but she might be more interested in food right now. See if she wants a little more snack. Probably. What I'm feeding her is Toronto Small Carnivore Diet. It's a special diet formulated by zoos just for small mustelids like Elizabeth Ann to make sure that they get all the nutrition that they need. We also supplement her diet with other foods like whole carcass rodents, because as we know, that's what she would eat in the wild. We'll see if she comes back up for her last bit here, and then we'll go see if we can find a litter of kittens. Here she comes. So I imagine she's going to probably stay down and eat for a while. See if she comes back. Oh. Get a really close look at her. All right, we're gonna let Elizabeth Ann finish her lunch. And we're gonna move rooms and go see if we can visit one of our earliest litters of babies, the first litter of babies that we had this year. So I'm gonna move you back around. We can turn around here and say bye to Elizabeth Ann on our way out. Bye, Elizabeth Ann. Enjoy your lunch. Our keepers will be in here very soon to feed the rest of our hungry black-footed ferrets, so don't worry. Now our litter of kits is in a different room, so we're just going to head over that way. Go ahead and walk around. Now we're in room 1. We have more ferrets. Alright, so Tom's just been helping me out here. We're just checking on this litter today, so we're just going to take a quick peek at our youngsters. So this is Spiracle's litter. And these are the first kits that were born this year at the Ferret Center. So she has 4 healthy boys. And they're just over 10 days old today. They're still blind and pretty much helpless, but they're just starting to get their fur coming in and just starting to develop those classic color plates. We won't keep Mom out from her kits for too long, so we're going to go ahead and head out. Thank you, Tom. We'll let Spirit go back in with her youngsters. All right, we're gonna head back over to part of the hall here, and then we can answer some questions about our ferrets.
That was amazing. Robin, thank you so much for taking us on that tour of those 2 different rooms at the Ferret Center. And I also really loved seeing the hallways where you guys work and everything you've got going on there. And of course, getting to see Elizabeth Ann, the first cloned black-footed ferret. She was just amazing.
She's great to work with, and we're so pleased to see that she's growing and developing and behaving like a normal black-footed female ferret. She's doing really well, and we've been really pleased with her development so far.
That is fantastic to hear. Well, Robin, you seem to know a lot about black-footed ferrets.
I've worked here for about a decade now, so in my time I have learned a little bit about ferrets, yes.
What got you interested in working with black-footed ferrets to begin with?
Well, when I went to school, I always knew that I wanted to work with conservation, and getting to work in a breeding center focused on endangered species conservation was pretty much a dream job for me. And so being able to work in this program and helping to recover the species is just something that I've always wanted to put my passion to use for. So it's been really great.
That's amazing. Noreen, I'm curious too. What got you interested in conservation?
I'm not sure I can answer that, Sierra, but I was interested in conservation from a young age. And so I too was really thrilled to be able to have a career in conservation and to be part of this exciting development that we're learning about today.
Thank you. Well, thank you again to both of you for being here. I know that I am really excited to get to learn more from you about black-footed ferrets, the recovery program, and the recent cloning. And I think our audience is too, because we've got some really great questions already. So to start, we've got a couple questions about enrichment and what sort of enrichment opportunities the ferrets at the center have. Robin, can you share a little bit with us about what they do for fun up there?
Sure. Well, you saw a little bit today. So one of the enrichment items we offer to our ferret are things that we call disposable enrichment, things that they can destroy or tear up, because that helps them practice their hunting skills, things they might want to do in the wild. So paper bags are very popular. They'll attack them and tear them up and shred them up and take them down to their dens. We'll also give them cardboard boxes and tubes to crawl and hide in and chew on, and they really enjoy that. We'll also do something that we call hide the kibbles. We will take just a few pieces of kibble, not enough to affect their diet, but just enough for a snack, and something fun to search and hide and look for. So we'll put that in various parts of their enclosure, and then they will practice searching and hunting behaviors, trying to find it. They enjoy that as well. And then we also have various toys and objects that they can manipulate and move around, balls and tubes and things like that. Those are other things that they enjoy. And we do offer small live rodents to our ferrets for live prey, and that also for them, since they are wild carnivore that relies on hunting for survival, is a very important enrichment activity for them.
That's a lot.
We try to keep them busy.
We have another question. Do they ever leave the enclosures we just saw?
So some will, and some will be there more. It kind of depends on what will happen with that ferret. So if it's a female and she has had a litter this year and her kits become designated to be released into the wild, then she will go with her kits out into a pen that we have outside, where they have space to run in the dirt and the grass, and they have burrows, and they learn how to live in the ground like wild ferrets. And she'll spend 30 days out there with her kits. And her kits will start to grow up there and learn how to live in a more natural environment. And then eventually they will be released into the wild. And some of our ferrets here may be released into wild later in life too, once they finish with their breeding responsibilities for the program. And some may spend time in the pens just if we're housing them there for a while. So they occasionally do get opportunities to not just be in the building.
That's great, thank you. All right, we've got some Elizabeth Ann specific questions.
Okay.
We have one about Elizabeth Ann and kits. Will she have her own kits someday?
We sure hope that she will. So Elizabeth Ann, because of the timing of the project, was born a little bit out of sync with our natural population. So we do not think that she will breed this year. Like I said, she's about 5.5 months old, and normally females who are breeding at this time of year are closer to 9 to 11 months old. So they will breed just before they hit their first birthday. But Elizabeth Ann is not quite old enough. So she is not into season this year, and that is just fine. That's probably better for her physiology. But we do hope to breed her next season in the spring of 2022, because of course, her being able to naturally breed will be the best way for her to contribute her very important genetics to the rest of the population.
This is a really good lead into our next question. Do you have any genetic material from other original BFFs that could potentially be cloned?
We do have a little bit. So the San Diego Frozen Zoo is housing at least one other potential founder, an animal we call studbook number 2, and it is a male. And he also has not contributed his genetics to the current population. So that is another source. He potentially may have some disease associated with his cells, so learning how to use it has been more difficult. That's why we started with Elizabeth Ann. But he is another potential founder, and we are definitely thinking about that. There are many other bits and pieces of ferrets out there in museums and other frozen collections. The material isn't as good, but it's possible that one day those also could be used.
It's got to be such an interesting time to be in conservation, having not only your breeding program opportunities and the history of the recovery program, but then to have this cloning, thrown into the mix as well. You've got a lot of different options that you guys are working with.
We do, and it's not something that I guess I thought, when I started in more traditional conservation just 10 years ago. We were just concentrated on trying to breed the ferrets that we have. Of course, we always hoped perhaps another wild population would be found, but it hasn't, and we're certain we have all the live ones that are out there. So when all of a sudden this option became a reality, it was just really exciting. Here was another avenue for us to get more genetic diversity into our population that could potentially really help the species. So having these new options at our fingertips is a really exciting time to be involved.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we have another question here from the audience about that gene pool diversity. And so you spoke to just having the two clones, but how do you make sure that you maintain that gene pool diversity, just in general with the ferrets?
So every year that we breed, since we started managing the population here in the program, our goal is to try and retain as much genetic diversity as possible. With only 7 founders and a starting population of 18, obviously we were somewhat limited from the beginning. So we try our best to keep what we have. And every year that you breed a population that's closed like this, you're subject to something that's called genetic drift, which means that some of the genes will not make it into the next generation just by random chance. So we try our best to reduce that, but it's a little bit unavoidable. To do the best that we can, we follow something that's called the Mate Suitability Index, and our partners with the Population Management Center with the Associations of Zoos and Aquariums helps us produce this table for all the black-footed ferrets in the managed population, including our zoo partners. And that way we're able to make the best genetic matches for every ferret that we have. So every time I pair ferrets, our goal is to produce kits that have the best beneficial genetics for the rest of the population. And that helps us reduce the amount of genetic diversity that we lose in a generation.
It's a lot of hard work, Robin.
It is, but the mating game in the spring is one of my favorite parts of my job. It's really exciting to see what the future season might have for our species.
I love that. Well, we've got a couple questions here. One from Delphia, who is 8 years old, and one from Gus, who is 12. Delphia would like to know, do all ferrets get black tips on their tails?
I would say yes, all of our black-footed ferrets are born with a tip on their tail. Very occasionally, we've had someone who, for some reason, their tail didn't develop all the way, and sometimes that little black tip doesn't make it on there. But for the most part, yes, every black-footed ferret is born with their classic black tail tip.
Gus would like to know if the ferrets ever bite the keepers occasionally if they get mad.
Our ferrets are wild animals, and we work hard to keep them that way because that gives them their best chance at survival. We don't want them to be tame like a pet ferret. So yes, if you give them the opportunity, a ferret may try to bite you, and our staff are very well trained on how to avoid that and how to safely maneuver the animal in its enclosure so that they don't get in a situation where they feel like they need to bite you. So making sure that the ferrets always feel safe and you're working in a careful way around them is the best way to avoid any negative interactions.
I think we can all probably understand the feeling of wanting to bite somebody who sticks their hand into your house.
Yes, they mostly don't always appreciate housekeeping services, but that's okay. We love them the wild way that they are.
Well, we have another question from Runa, who is 6 years old. How long until the baby ferrets can have their own baby ferrets? How old do ferrets have to be before they can have kids?
So ferrets breed relatively quickly for a carnivore species. The females are usually born in June or July, and they can be capable of having kids the following spring at the same time. So that means that they can breed just before they are 1 year old. So they're usually about 1 year of age when they are having their first litter of their own.
And how long do ferrets live, Robin?
Here with us in our center, our ferrets can live to be 5 to 8 years old is average. In the wild, where there are a lot more dangers like predation, their lifespan is much shorter. I would say 2 to 3.
Speaking of going out into the wild, we have a couple questions here about what sort of vaccines you are giving to the ferrets prior to their release.
So ever since we developed a vaccine for sylvatic plague, that is one of the top vaccines that our ferrets get. They also get a vaccine for canine distemper, to which they are also susceptible, and often we will also give them a rabies. And these basic 3 vaccines are something that really protect them when they head out into the field. Plague especially is a big danger for wild ferrets, and the vaccine that we give them can help give them a head start that makes life a little safer for them.
That is great, and so nice that you guys are able to give them that head start before they head out.
Mm-hmm. We try to give them the best start possible.
Yeah. All right, we've got another question from Delphia here. You mentioned earlier that there were 7 ferrets that they were able to catch up in the 80s, but she is wondering what all the other ferrets died from.
Right, so we caught up 18 ferrets originally, but only 7 have we consider to be founders of the population. So they are the original genetic material for our population now. There was a population out there of almost 120 ferrets when it was first discovered in 1981, but unfortunately it succumbed to the same diseases I just told you that we vaccinate our ferrets for now. So plague and distemper both became active in that colony, and unfortunately all the other ferrets that did not get caught and brought to our breeding program died in the wild, probably of those diseases. Or if the prairie dog colony on which they depend for survival starts to collapse, then they also don't have a food source because the prairie dogs also are very susceptible to the same disease, sylvatic plague.
Nella, age 11, is wondering if those vaccines protect the ferrets for life.
They do. The ferrets hold the protection that vaccine gives them very well. So generally they need 2 canine distemper vaccines and 2 plague vaccines when they are just 2 and 3 months old. And after that time, it should protect them for life. However, it does not transfer to their young. So that means that field biologists have to go out with our partners in the field and at the sites where we release ferrets and try and catch as many baby ferrets of the year as they can and vaccinate them, because unfortunately they did not get any protection that lasts from their mothers.
Do you always have to catch them up to vaccinate them, or do you sometimes have other means of dispersal for those vaccines?
Ferrets, unfortunately, at this time, the only vaccines that we know are safe and effective are injectable vaccines. So that means we have to catch every ferret probably twice for the best protection, and that can be very challenging to give them their vaccine. Now, we have tried a vaccine for prairie dogs, and we can put that in a bait that the prairie dogs think is tasty and they will eat, and they can develop a protection that way from plague. But unfortunately, we do not have a similar product yet for ferrets. So we continue to work very hard in the field and trap as many as we can before releasing them very quickly back out.
Sierra, can I ask Robin to talk a little bit about why plague is so problematic for ferrets? Why it's such a big threat to them?
Of course. So sylvatic plague is the same disease as the bubonic plague or the Black Death that was the scourge of medieval Europe for some time. It is the same bacteria, Yersinia pestis, and it is not native to North America. And that is probably the biggest problem. It came over with humans, probably on trading ships to California in the very early 1900s. And since then has spread eastward through rodent colonies probably, and it unfortunately became established in prairie dog colonies. And because they did not evolve with this disease, both prairie dogs and black-footed ferrets are almost 100% susceptible to dying from sylvatic plague. Some prairie dogs will survive the outbreak eventually and can recolonize, but in the meantime, the colony may collapse, and then there's no food or homes for the black-footed ferrets. And the black-footed ferrets have almost no natural immunity whatsoever, which is why we work so hard in our vaccination program. And so, since it affects both our ferrets and their food sources, this disease is a big problem for ferret recovery in the wild.
Thank you, Robin. You guys you're facing a lot of different odds out there. We have another question from the audience, also related to ferrets in the wild. Do you ever bring BFFs from the wild back to the breeding program to try to incorporate them into that program, or would that not be helpful for genetic diversity?
We have definitely thought about it because, as you just mentioned, there are many challenges to ferret recovery. And so we are always trying to think of new ways how we can help recover the species better. And one idea was, what are the ferrets like in the wild, and would they help the breeding program? You have to remember now that every wild ferret died, unfortunately. So that means every ferret living in the wild now comes from animals that we released, which means they have the same genetics, except that it might have been selected for in one direction or another by natural wild pressures, but they're coming from the same source genetics as the rest of the population. So they're not likely to have a lot of new genetic material. They may have tuned in genes and traits that are better for survival in the wild, and you could consider bringing them in and seeing if that would help, but it wouldn't increase our genetic diversity. Also, it does take time for wild animals that have been out there and not accustomed to living here with us at the center to be comfortable in this housing environment and breed. So that also can present a large challenge. So we always think about these things, but it's not something we do commonly.
Well, I imagine as a scientist, you are always testing and experimenting and coming up with new ideas and exploring different options.
Yes, like I said, we're always trying to innovate. Elizabeth Ann is proof of that innovation and imagination that scientists had to try and find more innovative ways to save this species. So we think that we're really heading somewhere special, and we are really excited to see what she can bring to the population.
That's great. We've got just a couple more questions here, Robin. Everyone wants to know all about your black-footed ferrets. So how do you know if they will be successful as a predator in the wild before you release them?
So the best ferrets to prepare for release in the wild are the young kits. And as I mentioned earlier, they go outside into a pen with their mother when they are just 60 days or 2 months old. So we think that every ferret born here has the potential to be an excellent wild predator, but they need a little help and practice to get there. So the best way to do that is for them to experience as close to their natural environment, but still a little bit protected so they can get that head start I mentioned. And we do that with our preconditioning pens. So they get to live outside, learn to live in the burrows, how to hide from predators. We do give them live prey. They learn to hunt and kill and feed themselves with their mother for help. And after they've done that for 30 days in a pen, usually they are very well prepared then to survive on their own in the wild, and they can be released after they're 3 or 4 months old.
How many ferrets have you released into the wild, and how many do you have in the conservation program right now?
We hold about 300, give or take, among our breeding facilities as what we call an assurance or managed population. And that means we have these guys here in case something very bad happens in the wild. We can breed them and try and restore the species again. And of course, we're still trying to reestablish our wild colonies. So every year we breed and release animals. we've released over 45 to 4,700 animals into the wild over the years. Obviously, because of the short lifespans in the wild I mentioned earlier, all those animals are not still out there. So we're still working very hard to establish our wild populations.
All right, Robin, I've got a couple more questions for you. And then we are gonna move on to our next speaker, Kim Fraser, who's actually here with us at the museum today.
Great.
Robin, Eliana, age 6, would like to know, how do ferrets sleep and where do they sleep?
Ferrets prefer most to sleep somewhere where they feel safe and secure. And for a ferret, that means a burrow underground, because that is their natural habitat. So we try hard here to give them the best space just like that to sleep in. And as you saw as we went through the ferret rooms, for them, that means they have a tunnel that goes from that cage surface, and then it comes down to the floor, and we have an enclosed nesting box that has 2 chambers in it, like where you saw the kits. And that's always where the mother ferret will have her babies, because it's the safest place that she has to have them. She feels like she's underground. They like it to be dark and snug. Because that in the wild is normally where they would be taking all of their snoozes, is in a nice, safe underground burrow. So our ferrets here at the center do similarly, and most of them will prefer to sleep in one of their nesting chambers.
Thank you. All right, the last question I have for you, Robin, before we move on, is whether or not Elizabeth Ann will ever be released into the wild.
So we don't think that Elizabeth Ann herself will probably ever go, and that's because she is so important to the population and to the helping her species, that the best way that she can help out her fellow ferrets is to be here at the center with us, having her own kits and contributing her genes to the population. Also, because of the way that we cloned her, we would like to study her more before we put any of those animals out into the wild, to make sure that they are the most fit and best prepared to help the population. So Elizabeth Ann will stay with us, and we will watch her very carefully, and hopefully we will get kits from her, and hopefully those kits will have kits, and her descendants at some point will help out her wild population, but Elizabeth Ann will probably stay in our safe care with us.
Wonderful. Well, Robin, thank you so much for answering all of our questions. And Noreen, thank you for coming on and sharing with us so much information about the program. It's been really wonderful getting to talk with both of you. We'll chat again before our program is done today, but we're going to move on to our next segment. So thank you both so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Sierra.
All right, everyone. Thank you all who are watching so much for your amazing questions. We are going to go now to Kimberly Fraser, who is here with us at Fort Collins Museum of Discovery. She is going to talk to us a little bit about Elizabeth Ann's very special family, and we'll get to hear a little bit about this unique group of ferrets. Kimberly, hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you today?
Well, I'm here with 2 very special mamas.
Well, thank you for being here with us. We are so excited to hear all about these 2 ladies you have with you.
Yes. So for the cloning process for Elizabeth Ann to be born, they used 2 domestic females in the process. So this one is, in fact, people want to know, why are they named Lizzie and Annie? And that's because how often do parents get to be named after their famous children? So Elizabeth Ann, and this is Lizzie, and this is Annie. And Elizabeth Ann, the embryos, clone embryos, were implanted into Lizzie. And so Lizzie actually carried them in utero, and Elizabeth Ann was actually delivered by C-section. And when that happened, Lizzie could not nurse her. So here comes the second surrogate mom, Annie. And Annie was able to nurse Elizabeth Ann with her other domestic kits. And so Elizabeth Ann grew up in a litter of, they weren't black-footed ferrets, but they were domestics. And so she had 2 mamas and some siblings to learn how to rustle and grow up with, until she was able to separate from them at about 60 days old. So Elizabeth Anne is very fortunate. You know, families come in all shapes and sizes, and she was very fortunate to have two loving mothers bring her into this world and nurture her in this world. And Annie and Lizzie live right here at the Fort Collins Museum of Discovery. They're not on display yet, but the museum will be having live ferret feedings, you know, with the two black-footed ferrets that are on display. And during that program, we'll bring out Annie and Lizzie, and you can meet them. So anyway, it's wonderful to have them here. You know, they're probably some of the most famous ferrets in the world, that they were the moms to the first clone of a black-footed ferret. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kimberly, for sharing Lizzie and Annie with us. They're really lovely.
They are, and you know what? It's kind of sweet that we can hold them, and because you can't hold a black-footed ferret, so I find that pretty nice thing that can happen. Also, I want to tell people, if you want to learn more about the cloning story, our partners Revive and Restore, they've put together an incredible video explaining the process for Elizabeth Ann, and it's very good. And so we will be posting that on the National Black-Footed Ferret Conservation Center Facebook page. It's a YouTube video, and if you're interested, I encourage you to watch it, because it just really puts the science to the story, and it's very exciting. You know, we can't ever thank our partners enough in this program. We have over 50 partners from state and tribal and federal NGOs and private landowners that help us with this recovery effort, and we greatly appreciate all their efforts in recovering the black-footed ferret.
It really does take a village, doesn't it?
It does. It does.
Well, Kim, these are not the only ferrets that we have at the museum. Do you want to talk a little bit about the display that we have with our black-footed ferrets there?
Yes. So we have considered the best ferret display in North America. It's a display in the round. It looks like you cut a chunk out of the prairie, roots and all, and set it right down in the middle of the museum. And in that display is housed two live black-footed ferrets, and they're retirees from up at the Ferret Center where Robin works. Right now we have Patty Ann, a female, and Stevie Nicks, a female, and they're quite special ferrets. We can't hold them like these two, but we do feedings, and you'll get to see them chomp on their meal. And you know, black-footed ferrets are nocturnal and solitary, so it's pretty special that we do this feeding program. Kind of have to wake them up, but you'll get to see a live black-footed ferret, which most people will never be able to see one. So come on down to the museum and check out the feeding, and Patty Ann and Stevie Nicks, and meet Annie and Lizzie.
Thank you. Well, we do have a few more audience questions for you. Why didn't you use a black-footed ferret to carry the clone?
That is a great question. And the reason being, we don't have that many black-footed ferrets. You know, we have, like Robin said, about 300 in captivity. In the wild right now, due to surveys and other information, we feel we probably have around 300 to 500 in the wild. So it just made sense, the geneticists working on this, it made sense to use domestic ferrets for this cloning process. It worked beautifully. But who knows in the future? You know, maybe that will be part of a new cloning project. So that's why. Boy, these guys are kind of squirmy.
They are. They look like they're ready to play.
Yes, they have a great place here at the museum to live. So they do love their area.
Well, Robin shared with us all about the enrichment opportunities for black-footed ferrets at the Conservation Center. What sort of enrichment do you provide to Lizzie and Annie?
You know, ferrets, there are 3 species in the world: your black-footed ferret, your domestic ferret, which these 2 are, and then there's a Siberian polecat that lives in Mongolia. And all ferrets are burrow dwellers. And so these 2 we buy plastic tubing for them to crawl around in. And ferrets, as you can see, they have quite a long body. They can fold themselves in half to turn around in the tubes. They can pass each other in the tubes. So they love just getting in the tubes. They drag all kinds of toys in there, and they just have a good time. And that's just part of who they are.
Sounds like a pretty fun way to go about their day.
Yes.
We have a couple other questions here. Do BFFs smell like regular ferrets smell?
You know what? If you have a domestic ferret, you know that these guys have musk glands, and so they do have an odor. And black-footed ferrets do too, but not nearly as powerful of a smell as these domestics. But black-footed ferrets also have musk glands, and that's for territory marking and just saying who they are.
Thank you. Do black-footed ferrets sleep in funny positions like domestic ferrets do?
Boy, good question. You know, because they're fossorial, meaning they spend the majority of their time underground, we really don't know how they sleep in the wild, but we can view them here at the museum through some windows down into their nest chambers, and they curl up pretty much like a cat. Sometimes they'll, splay out on their back and roll over and throw their feet up in the air. But for the most part, they make a little nest in the substrate, and then they just kind of circle around and around and kind of fall asleep, probably the same way your dog or cats do at home.
It must be interesting having the 2 domestic ferrets and the 2 black-footed ferrets in the same building. I would guess you're able to kind of compare and contrast their behaviors a little bit.
It is great for people to see the difference. You know, often people just don't understand. They think the black-footed ferrets, they can go to Petco and buy one, but not true. You know, they're wild, they're endangered, federally protected. But domestic ferrets you can purchase. And so it is a great comparison, and we'll be doing that during the program, that you can see the differences between the 2 species. We don't have any of the Siberian polecats, though, unfortunately.
Maybe someday.
Maybe someday.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kimberly. I have one last question for you from Odessa, age 10. Do BFFs do the weasel war dance?
Oh, yes, they do. Thank you for asking that question. And, you know, even these 2 were kind of, they arch their back, they kind of strut around. It's really good dancing to banjo music. And black-footed ferrets do that too. If you go to the Facebook page, again, the National Black-Footed Ferret Conservation Center Facebook page, or blackfootedferret.org, all one word, blackfootedferret.org. You can see some of those videos. And we don't really know why they do it. Sometimes it's been referred to as the ferret happy dance, but guaranteed it will put a smile on your face just to see the joy that ferrets exhibit when they dance. So yes, that's a great question.
Well, I think that is all the questions we have time for today. But Kimberly, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and bring back Noreen and Robin, our amazing, wonderful panelists for today. Thank you so much to all of you. I know that I have really loved getting to chat with you and hear all about what you do in black-footed ferret conservation. You all have very cool jobs.
Thank you, Sierra. I love working here as well.
Hey, Sierra, can I say something?
Absolutely, Noreen.
I just wanted to say thank you to Robin. I think it's pretty clear to everybody listening today that we have somebody caring for these ferrets at the Black-Footed Ferret Conservation Center that is like a walking encyclopedia of black-footed ferret knowledge, all the way from their physiology to their behavior to what they need in the wild and what the threats are. So I'm so happy that so many people are concerned about black-footed ferrets, and I think you can tell from what we heard from Robin today that they're in very good hands there at the Black-footed Ferret Conservation Center. Thanks, Robin.
You're welcome, Noreen. I was very happy to share our ferrets with you guys today.
Yes, thank you all. I agree. If black-footed ferrets have you all working on their recovery, I have no doubt that very, very soon we'll be able to take them right off that endangered species list. But until then, we are so happy to continue celebrating them. And it's been really a pleasure getting to hear from all of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Come by and see us.
Welcome.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today for our Endangered Species Day celebration. I have been so excited to be your moderator and to get to introduce all these amazing speakers to you so we could all learn about the black-footed ferret and the incredible recovery efforts happening to save them and bring them back from the brink of extinction. If you enjoyed our program today, please look us up. We are the Fort Collins Museum of Discovery in Fort Collins, Colorado. You can visit our website at fcmod.org/events to learn more about upcoming programs that we have, both virtually and in person. And if you enjoyed the program today and you would like to help bring programs like this to our community in the future, you can donate to the museum at fcmod.org/donate. Thank you all for tuning in, and I hope to see you visit us and our black-footed ferrets and Lizzie and Annie soon.